If you're in your 20s and you feel like you're doing all the right things, but your money still isn't building, you're not alone. Most people don't fail because they never invest. They fail because they never build a system that can run when life gets busy, expensive, and distracting. And if you don't understand that difference, it's incredibly easy to work for years, earn more over time, and still feel like you're stuck at the same starting line. In this video, I'm going to make that whole problem feel simple, not by giving you tricks, but by showing you the few quiet patterns that stop wealth from ever forming in the first place. In a moment, you'll be able to look at your own habits and say, calmly, oh, that's the leak. And once you can see the leak, fixing it stops feeling overwhelming. This isn't financial advice. It's a simple, educational breakdown of how wealth building actually works, explained clearly and calmly, so it feels understandable instead of intimidating. Nothing here is about quick wins, hot takes, or trying to beat anyone else. It's about the basic mechanics that quietly decide whether money stacks up over time or keeps slipping away. And the reason this matters is that most people never get a clean explanation of the real game. They're taught to focus on what to buy before they understand what wealth even is. Wealth is not a single smart decision. It's what's left over after thousands of normal days. So the goal here is clarity. You're going to understand why most people never build wealth, even when they earn decent money. And you're going to understand it in a way that lowers stress instead of increasing it. Here's exactly how we'll break this down, and I'm going to keep it structured so you always know where you are. Part 1 is the core concept. What building wealth actually means in real life, and why most people misunderstand the process. This is the foundation, because if you think wealth comes from the wrong thing, you'll keep making the wrong moves while feeling like you're trying. Part 2 is the expansion. We'll make it feel real with a few beginner scenarios, the kind you'll recognize immediately. We'll look at what people assume is happening with their money versus what's actually happening. And we'll use a simple time-based illustration so you can see why the first few years feel slow for almost everyone. Before we get to any "what should I do?" you need to see the pattern clearly. Part 3 is the application. Not platforms, not products, not optimization. Just a calm, behavior-based setup that reduces friction, reduces decision fatigue, and makes consistency more likely. Because most people don't lose the game from a lack of intelligence. They lose from a lack of repeatability. And as we go, I'll keep looping back to the same question. Does this make wealth easier to happen, even on messy weeks? In a moment, you'll see why that question matters more than it seems. Most people never build wealth because they treat wealth like an event instead of a process. An event is something you wait for, a promotion, a lucky break, a perfect time to start. A moment when you finally feel ready. A process is something you run, even when you're not in the mood, even when your schedule changes, even when life gets expensive. Here's the simplest way to define wealth in plain English. Wealth is the gap between what you earn and what you consistently keep, invested for long enough that time can do some of the heavy lifting. That sounds obvious, but it hides the entire problem. Because most people focus almost entirely on the earn part. They think the game is, get a better job, increase income, and wealth will naturally appear. And yes, income helps, but income does not automatically turn into wealth. For wealth to form, you need 3 things working together: a stable gap, a consistent habit, and enough time. If any one of those is missing, wealth doesn't form. And the part that surprises people is this: you can be smart, hardworking, and even high-earning, and still miss one of those 3 without realizing it. Let's talk about the first one, the gap. The gap is simply the difference between what comes in and what goes out. People often assume the gap is something you find when you become more disciplined. In reality, the gap is something you design. Because if your lifestyle expands to match your income, the gap stays small. And if the gap stays small, time has nothing meaningful to work with. It's like trying to fill a bathtub while the drain is open. You can pour in more water, but if the drain widens at the same time, the water level barely rises. This is one of the quietest reasons wealth never forms. Expenses don't just rise because life gets more expensive. Expenses rise because people unconsciously upgrade their standard of normal. A bigger apartment becomes just where I live. Eating out becomes just what I do. A car payment becomes just transportation. Subscriptions become just small things. And suddenly the gap is not something you protect. It's something you hope will magically appear. Now the second piece, consistency. Most people think consistency is about motivation, like you either have discipline or you don't. But in money, consistency is mostly about friction. If building wealth requires constant decisions, constant willpower, and constant monitoring, you won't do it consistently for 10 years. Not because you're lazy, because you're human. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't debate it every day. You don't get inspired to do it. It's a default behavior with low friction. That's what a wealth system needs to feel like. Not exciting, not complicated, just default. The reason this is so important is that wealth is built by repetition, not intensity. Most people approach money with intensity. They have a burst of energy in January. They reorganize everything. They read a bunch of content. They try to do 5 new habits at once. Then real life shows up. A busy week, an unexpected bill, a stressful month, and the system collapses because it was built on effort instead of design. In a moment, I'll show you what this looks like in real life with a very common scenario. But first, there's a third piece that almost nobody respects. Time. Time is not just how long you invest. Time is the multiplier that turns small, repeated actions into meaningful outcomes. But time only multiplies what is consistent. If you do something for a month, stop for 6 months, restart for 2 months, then stop again, you're not using time. You're resetting time. You're constantly going back to the early phase where results feel invisible. And that leads to one of the biggest psychological traps in money. The early phase feels pointless. In the beginning, you can do the right thing and still feel like nothing is happening. The numbers move slowly. The progress doesn't feel dramatic. And if you're expecting wealth to feel like an event, that early phase is where you give up. So the core concept is this. Wealth is a slow-built structure made from a protected gap, a low-friction system, and enough uninterrupted time. Most people never build wealth because they repeatedly break one of those 3 without noticing. They don't protect the gap because lifestyle inflation quietly eats it. They don't build a system because they rely on motivation. They don't give it time because they expect early results to feel obvious. Now let's make this feel real, because once you see the pattern in real life, it becomes much easier to fix without panic. Let's walk through 2 realistic beginner scenarios, the kind that happen to people who are genuinely trying. Scenario 1. The "I'm doing fine, but nothing is stacking" scenario. You're in your 20s. You've got a decent job. Not perfect, but stable. Your income isn't huge, but it's enough that you're not constantly struggling. You tell yourself you'll start investing once you have more room. And you're not irresponsible. You pay your bills. You're not buying wild luxury stuff. You just don't feel like you have extra. What people assume is happening is, I'm not earning enough yet. Once I earn more, the extra will appear, and then I'll invest. What's actually happening is, your spending is quietly learning how to use every dollar you make. Not in a dramatic way, in a normal way, a slightly nicer place, more convenience purchases, more little treats because work is stressful, a vacation you feel you deserve, a new phone because everyone has one, a couple monthly payments that don't feel serious on their own. Each one feels reasonable, and the scary part is, each one is reasonable, but together they do something specific. They set your baseline spending. So when your income rises, your baseline rises with it. And because you're not building a system, the default outcome is that the gap stays small. Then one day, you get a raise. And for 2 weeks, you feel rich. And then your life adjusts, and you feel normal again. That's not a personal failure. That's how baselines work. Now here's the retention loop, because in a moment I'll show you the calm fix. But first, you need to see why this isn't about willpower. Imagine your financial life as a conveyor belt. Money comes in, and it immediately gets assigned a job. Rent, food, transportation, fun, convenience, subscriptions, small upgrades. If you don't deliberately assign a job called building wealth, the belt will assign every dollar somewhere else. Not because you're bad, because the belt is always moving. So that's scenario 1. The gap never stabilizes because lifestyle inflation quietly trains your spending to match your earning. Scenario 2, the I started, then I stopped scenario. This is extremely common. You decide to be responsible. You start putting aside money. You feel proud. You read about investing basics. You feel like you're finally doing the adult thing. Then life happens. You have a month with unexpected costs, or a stressful period where you spend more for comfort, or you move, or your car needs work, or you have a family situation, or you just have a few busy weeks and you stop paying attention. And because your system depended on attention, it collapses. You stop contributing. You stop thinking about it. And a few months later, you feel guilty, so you avoid looking at it entirely. What people assume is happening is, I failed. I don't have discipline. I'm not consistent. What's actually happening is, your setup had too much friction. If your wealth building requires your best self to show up every month, your wealth building is not designed for real life. This is one of the most important contrasts in money. People assume wealth comes from being a consistently disciplined person. But wealth usually comes from having a system that still works when you're not. Now let's add a time-based illustration, because this is where the emotional part becomes clear. Picture 10 years as a long hallway. At the far end is the version of you who has built real stability. Not a fantasy life, just calm stability. Less stress, more options, more resilience. To get to the end of the hallway, you don't need to sprint. You just need to keep walking. But here's what most people do. They walk for 3 months, then they stop for 6 months. They walk again for 2 months, then they stop for a year. They restart when they feel anxious, then stop when they feel fine. So even after 10 calendar years, they've only walked for maybe 1 or 2 years in total. The rest of the time, they were standing still. And that's why wealth doesn't form, not because they didn't try, but because time only multiplies movement. This is also why wealth can feel unfair from the outside. You see someone who started earlier and stayed consistent, and it looks like their money took off. But what you're seeing is the compounding effect of uninterrupted time, not a secret trick. Now let's talk about another quiet pattern that keeps people stuck. Confusing activity with progress. A lot of people are busy with money. They research, they watch videos, they worry about what's optimal, they overthink risk, they debate the perfect moment to begin. What people assume is happening is, I'm preparing, I'm being responsible, I'm learning. What's actually happening is, they're delaying the only thing that matters, consistent action. Learning is good, but there's a point where learning becomes a way to avoid discomfort. And the discomfort is simple: starting before you feel ready. Because when you start, you have to accept that your first steps won't feel impressive. Your first year won't look like a dramatic transformation. Your early progress will look boring. And a lot of people quit because they think boring means broken. In a moment, I'll translate all of this into a calm setup you can actually stick to. But before that, there's one more pattern that quietly blocks wealth for beginners. Treating money decisions like emergencies. When markets feel uncertain, people feel uncertain. When headlines are loud, people feel loud inside. So they pause, or they react, or they abandon consistency. What people assume is happening is, I'm protecting myself by waiting. What's actually happening is, they're training themselves to only act when they feel safe. And the problem is that you will never feel perfectly safe for long periods of time. Life is uncertain by default. If your system requires certainty, your system will rarely run. So the proof is in the patterns. Wealth doesn't fail because people are ignorant. It fails because their system is fragile. It breaks under normal pressure. Lifestyle inflation, decision fatigue, emotional reactions, and the slow, early phase that feels unrewarding. Now let's talk about how to build something that doesn't break. This section is not about picking things. It's about building a calm structure. If you want wealth to be likely, your goal is not to be perfect. Your goal is to make the right behavior easier than the wrong behavior. Start with the gap, because without a gap, there is no fuel. A practical way to think about the gap is to stop asking, how much can I invest, and start asking, what amount can I protect as non-negotiable without feeling punished? That amount should feel almost boring, almost too small, because the point is not to impress yourself. The point is to build a behavior you can keep during stressful months. If you pick an amount that requires a heroic version of you, it won't survive real life. If you pick an amount that fits inside real life, it becomes stable. And stability is what time can multiply. Next, reduce friction. Friction is any point where you have to debate with yourself, any point where you can procrastinate, any point where you can decide later. So your goal is to turn wealth building into a default, not a decision. That means you want fewer moving parts, fewer choices, and fewer reasons to check it constantly. Checking constantly feels productive, but it often increases emotion. And emotion is the enemy of consistency. A calm system feels like this. I do the same simple thing on the same schedule. I don't need to be in a perfect mood. I just let it run. Now protect the system from lifestyle inflation. This is where many people get stuck because they think it requires deprivation. It doesn't. It requires awareness. Lifestyle inflation is not spending money. It's letting every upgrade become permanent without noticing what it does to your future. A calm rule that works is this: when your income increases, your wealth building increases first, before your lifestyle does. Not forever, not dramatically, just first. Because if you upgrade lifestyle first, the gap disappears. If you upgrade the system first, you keep the gap alive. Now, about time. Your job is to stay in the hallway. Keep walking. That doesn't mean you never make adjustments. It means you don't stop moving. If you have a hard month, you don't treat it like a moral failure. You treat it like weather. Bad weather doesn't mean you stop believing in the climate. It means you adjust your clothing and keep going. And one more thing that sounds small but changes everything. Stop requiring emotional certainty. A wealth system is not something you run when you feel confident. It's something you run so you can become confident over time. When you build a structure that runs quietly, you reduce the need to make big, dramatic decisions. You stop trying to time your life. You stop trying to be brilliant. You just become consistent. In a moment, I'll summarize this in a simple way you can remember, because the goal is not complexity. The goal is clarity you can actually live with. If you take nothing else from this, take this. Most people never build wealth because they don't build something that can survive normal life. They don't protect a gap, so there's no fuel. They don't reduce friction, so consistency depends on mood. They don't give it uninterrupted time, so they keep resetting progress. And they treat uncertainty like a stop sign, when it's actually just part of the road. You don't need to rush this. Understanding the system is more important than trying to do everything at once. The calm version of wealth building is not dramatic. It's repetitive, it's stable. It's designed to work when you're busy, when you're tired, and when you're not thinking about it. So your next step is simple. Look at your own setup and ask, where is my system fragile? Is it the gap? Is it friction? Is it time? Is it emotional reacting? You only need to fix one weak point at a time. And in the next video, we'll go one layer deeper into protecting your money without overthinking, so you can keep building even when life feels uncertain, without turning your finances into a constant stress project.